This time, Lian Rufing took a group of guards to the Kinyan tribe 3,000 miles away to exchange for shopping, and brought back some supplies that the villagers needed. Distributed to villagers. Soon, at Xiao Danren's call, a group of villagers rushed towards the ancestral hall in the village. Lin Xun was also warmly invited, but he declined. He only arrived at Feiyun village yesterday, and it was not his turn to distribute supplies. It was very late in the evening, and the sun was still shining. Lin Xun sat casually under the cyan weeping willow in his courtyard, holding the cyan short blade in his right hand, and was carving a piece of stone pine and silver wood. Haha. The sharp blade is like a spring silkworm spinning silk. With a delicate and precise force, it moves on the surface of the stone pine and silver wood like a cloud and flowing water. Lin Xun's palms and fingers are slender, broad, and fair. He holds a short pale blue blade at will. It flutters frequently like a butterfly in a flower, which is pleasing to the eye. For the apprentices of the spirit pattern, before learning the spirit pattern of seal carving, they must first practice the skills of exertion, which is naturally inseparable from the exercise of the hands and fingers. Whether the palm and fingers are flexible and stable is the most critical part of seal carving. After all, the spirit pattern of seal carving is not simply about engraving the patterns of the spirit patterns, but also needs to guide the spiritual power in the body, so as to manipulate and control the shade, thickness, light and shade of the spirit ink, and the effect of the spirit ink on the patterns of the spirit patterns. Degree of fit. Taking the most basic greenwood spirit pattern as an example, if you want to seal it, you need to prepare a seal pen, a plate of greenwood spirit ink, and a carrier. Seal pen. It is a tool to outline the spirit pattern, controlled by the spirit pattern master. Manipulating and using the seal pen, the test is the flexibility and precision of the palm and fingers. It is worth mentioning that there are also good and bad seal pens. Good seal pens are more compatible with spiritual ink and spiritual power, while inferior seal pens are the opposite. Like the seal pen Kinky and Burning Gold that was broken by Mr. Lu in Lin Xun's memory, it is an extremely precious and rare treasure, and its value is immeasurable. The spirit ink is the ink needed to outline the spirit patterns. Spirit ink is generally smelted from various spirit materials, and different spirit inks have different unique powers. The greenwood spirit ink is composed of 16 kinds of spiritual materials, including greenwood fragrance, white spirit leaf, spiritual mayfly blood, red warbler tears, etc., according to different weights and proportions. Smelting in the furnace. The final condensed essence power. Using this spiritual ink to engrave Oki spirit pattern is the best choice for both the fit and the chance of success. The so-called carrier is the place where the greenwood spirit pattern needs to be engraved. Generally speaking, this kind of carrier must also be a spiritual object. For example, the spirit pattern can be engraved on a weapon, on armor, or on utensils, such as houses, tea sets, carriages and horses, etc. Like the light-inducing spirit pattern that Lin Xun engraved yesterday, his fingertips replaced the seal pen, and the spirit ink used the bone powder of the golden rat, and its carrier was the piece of spirit field. A trace of spiritual energy can naturally be regarded as a spiritual object. However, this light-inducing spirit pattern carved in the spiritual field is too shallow and does not have a spiritual power source, so it can only be used once, and cannot be preserved forever. The so-called spiritual power source is an item that continuously provides power for the spiritual pattern, which can be a spiritual stone, a spiritual vein, or some other treasures rich in spiritual power. In short, it seems that only a seal pen, a plate of spiritual ink, and a carrier are enough to engrave the spirit patterns. In fact, there are extremely complicated and rigorous steps involved, not as simple as imagined. And it is even more difficult to become a qualified spirit rune master, which is why the identity and status of the spirit rune master is so noble. A long time ago, Lin Xun became a spiritual pattern apprentice when he started learning seal carving with Mr. Lu. Up to now, he is still a spirit pattern apprentice. The reason for this is that with Lin Xun's current cultivation base and attainments, he can only skillfully engrave those basic spirit patterns. Of course, apart from Mr. Lu, Lin Xun has never had contact with any other spirit pattern master, which makes him unable to judge the level of his own spirit pattern carving. In the past, Lin Xun had asked Mr. Lu more than once, and Mr. Lu's answer was always only one movement, shaking his head and sighing. Shaking his head is a denial. Sigh is a disappointment. Negation and disappointment. One can imagine how many blows Lin Xun has caused over the years. Fortunately, Lin Xun has never been discouraged, and has gradually become accustomed to Mr. Lu's blows. Even under this kind of blow, Lin Xun was inspired to be fierce every time, and he constantly competed with himself, but it made his level of engraving spirit patterns continue to improve. What is more and more courageous? That's it. At this time, the twilight was dark, and the setting sun shed the orange-red afterglow, which dyed the blue weeping willow in the small courtyard with a magnificent luster. The breeze blows, swaying thousands of willows, whirling gracefully, rustling, quiet and leisurely. In Lin Xun's palm, the blue short blade kept flying, and soon he carved a lifelike image of an old man. His hair was disheveled, his face was wrinkled like ravines, and his body was as thin as a bamboo. Unruly. This is the image of Mr. Deer. Every inch of this wood carving is outlined by delicate and precise spiritual patterns, but there is no trace of spiritual patterns. Staring blankly at the wood carving image in his palm, Lin Xun was silent for a long time, and finally sighed silently, picked up the short blue-green blade again, and destroyed the wood carving inch by inch. Then, Lin Xun stood up, a thin figure standing in the setting sun. A look of firmness appeared on his delicate and slightly pale face. People cannot live in memories, and to live, we must keep looking forward. When night fell, all the villagers in Feian village received the necessary supplies one by one and returned from the ancestral hall. Lin Xunrui found that although the supplies were obtained, there was not much joy in the brows of the villagers. Instead, many people looked like they were frowning. Even faintly, a quarrel could be heard coming from the direction of the ancestral hall in the village. Lin Xun could hear that it seemed that the village chief Xiao Anran and the guard leader Lian Rufing were arguing, but soon, the quarrel died down. When the night was getting darker and darker, a rush of hooves sounded from the village, and gradually disappeared outside the village, disappearing into the vast mountains in the dark night. It seems that Lian Rufing left again in the dark. Lin Xun pondered silently for a while, then turned round and returned to his room. He was about to meditate and practice as usual when someone suddenly came to visit. Bang bang bang. The knock on the door was loud, and it seemed a bit harsh and rude in this quiet night.